Taiwan is
Attention. This video has been taken offline by request of the People's Republic of China. The contents of this video have been deemed counter-revolutionary by the Department of Public Protection and will not be shown. A state-approved version will now be played instead. Taiwan is China's 27th province. Also, nothing happened on June 4, 1989, and Hong Kong protesters are right-wing professionals paid by the CIA.
Okay, so if you take a look at the current list of United Nations members, you'll notice a stark lack of Taiwan. Nor at the Olympics, the World Trade Organization, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. But is Taiwan a country? I'm pretty sure that it's a country. I mean, how can it not be? Well, depending on who you ask, Taiwan, the world's 38th largest island, is either a country, a province of China, or is China. Back in the 1910s, while Europe was busy killing itself, China was also busy killing itself in a separate conflict called the Warlord Era. Tons of powerful frat houses, called cliques, fought for power to be the true leaders of China. This guy, Sun Yat-sen, wanted to be the one to re-establish law and order, and so asked the international community for help to do this. The only people who took up his offer were the Soviet Union, who said that they'd only help if Sun Yat-sen's party, the Kuomintang, formed an alliance with the Chinese Communist Party. They agreed, and soon the frat houses were crushed and the Chinese Republic proclaimed. Sun Yat-sen and his party, the Kuomintang, were installed as the government of China. The Kuomintang followed three key tenets called the Three Principles of the People. Minzu, literally nationalism, meaning unity of a nation. The multiple ethnic groups of China should come together to form one republic. Even the colours of the flag of China came to represent these. Number 2 was Mingquan, literally people's power, meaning democracy. China was now a republic, so it made sense. Most Western countries have 3 branches of government: the executive, the judicial, and the legislative branch. However, Mingquan mandated 5. The auditing branch was the anti-corruption branch, and the examination branch trained up the government workers to ensure they knew what they were doing. The last principle was Minsheng, the people's livelihood. That means stuff like welfare and healthcare. This would be funded by a tax on land. More info here, click click. The scope of this also extends to clothing and housing, which some suspect was Sun Yat-sen hinting he was interested in socialism, but unfortunately he died before he could further elaborate on it. After his death, the Kuomintang party had an internal dispute on what to do next. Eventually this guy, Chiang Kai-shek, took control of the party and broke off the agreement with the Communist Party, and then started massacring communists in the street. Not a good look, if I say so myself. The situation was obviously intolerable to the Communist Party, so they started a war over it. A civil war. So they're both at war, duking it out, until imperialist Japan decided it would be a perfect time to exploit the situation and conquer China for the Japanese Empire. So they invaded China, and the Kuomintang and communists decided that although they hated each other very much, they hated the Japanese more, so they put their civil war on hold to team up and fight the Japanese. Japan was eventually defeated, and the civil war flared up again, but the rest of the world still recognized this government as the real government of China. That's important because after a wild goose chase, the communists are able to push the Kuomintang back to the island of Taiwan and claim ownership of the Chinese mainland. But because the government of China still exists on this island, the Republic of China still exists, at least according to the rest of the free world. All of this stuff is just occupied by a rebel force. So despite controlling none of mainland China, Taiwan, which is officially the Republic of China, claimed to be the official government of China. Meanwhile, these guys, who just took over China, also claim to be the real China, but officially aren't, because the legitimate Chinese government still exists on this part of China. What makes this whole mess even more hilarious is that Taiwan was given China's permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council when the UN was set up in 1945. So this was officially China, but this was China. In 1971, the confusion finally came to an end when the United Nations voted in favour of transferring China's seat on the Security Council to China. With the last bastion of Chinese liberty trapped on a small island while authoritarian communists ravaged the mainland, what was Taiwan to do? Oh, it's simple enough, just declare martial law and become just as bad as the Maoists across the ocean. Yes, instead of sticking to the mainland and setting an example, Chiang Kai-shek installed himself as president for life and began a purge of dissidents starting in February 1947, killing up to 28,000 people, most of whom were probably innocent. The native Taiwanese had their local culture suppressed in favour of a more generally Chinese culture to show the rest of the world that China still exists on this island. In the meantime, the People's Republic of China began the Great Leap down the stairs, where millions of Chinese citizens died accidental or intentional deaths, all in the name of progress. When Mao inherited China, everyone was illiterate, so he simplified the Chinese language to make it easier to learn. Taiwan, on the other hand, kept traditional with their style of the Chinese language. That's why on language select screens, you can pick between Chinese simplified and Chinese traditional. Even as Taiwan industrialized and grew prosperous, tensions remained between two groups. Refugees in the Kuomintang party who had moved to the island after the Civil War were still adamant that the Chinese Civil War wasn't over yet, and one day they could finally retake the mainland. Meanwhile, their children and grandchildren disagreed with their authoritarian government and demanded more freedom. When Chiang Kai-shek died in 1975, the government relaxed some of the repression laws, giving the opportunity for some of these descendants to create a pro-democracy newspaper called Formosa, named after a short-lived republic on the island of Taiwan before Japanese occupation. On the 10th of December 1979, Formosa organised for hundreds of protesters to begin marching in opposition of the government on Taiwan's first Human Rights Day. The protesters were suppressed by military police, and the 8 leaders of Formosa were all arrested. This became a turning point for Taiwan. Middle-class Taiwanese people, who the government relied on for support, became more supportive of human rights and democracy, and pressured the Kuomintang government to open up society. Many people aligned with Formosa formed a full political party called the Democratic Progressive Party, and began contesting in elections. This culminated with the lifting of martial law in 1987. The Democratic Progressive Party became the first legal political opposition to the Kuomintang. Anyway, come the year 2000, the Kuomintang were eventually voted out of power, and since then control over the island has fluctuated between the centre-left Democratic Progressive Party and the centre-right Kuomintang. The 3 principles of the people are still practiced in Taiwan today, with there being 5 branches of government, not 3, a land value tax to support welfare, and universal civil liberties. So about that whole being a country thing. The Kuomintang still hold that Taiwan is the true government of China, but the Democratic Progressives lean more towards Taiwan is basically an independent country, so we should drop pretending to be China and make it formal. That's not strictly possible until Taiwan becomes a member of the United Nations. To become a member, over 50% of countries, and all of these countries need to recognise it as independent, but you can probably guess there's one big roadblock to that. Also, with the ultra-authoritarian PRC not taking too kindly to interior independence movements, you can imagine declaring independence would be a death blow to Taiwan's very existence. Usually when there is an isolated region pretending to be a country, nobody recognises it. They're a poor backwater lacking the connections to trade. But that's clearly not the case with Taiwan. There's a pretty sneaky workaround that allows Taiwan to participate in the world stage while keeping China happy. The World Trade Organization, probably the most important organization for any country, isn't open to just countries. Hong Kong and Macau, semi-independent territories of China, are full members. So Taiwan is also a member, but as Chinese Taipei. It's also how they compete at the Olympics. Foreign countries don't have embassies in Taiwan, they have consulates, or in the case of the United States, non-profit charities that receive government donations and advice for no reason. All this to avoid stepping on the toes of the mighty People's Republic of China. So is Taiwan China? A part of China? Or is it just Taiwan? Western supporters of Taiwan use the phrase "Taiwan is the real China" all over Twitter because it annoys Chinese communists, and that's really funny.
Taiwan #1.
Fuck you!
Taiwan #1.
Shut up! Fuck you, bitch!
But the reality is that while Taiwan's political parties argue over whether to declare independence or reassert their claim as the legitimate Chinese government, they forget that the most common opinion in Taiwan is to simply do nothing.